Good afternoon, everyone. We're just about to get underway here. It's a little bit thin at the moment, but after lunch sessions, I fully expect it to be this way, so hopefully people will trickle in as they need it. This is getting maximum value from Lync with a well-planned deployment, part of the business value track. It's not too late if you're in the wrong room. Feel free to make a discreet exit. I will talk a little bit about what I am going to be talking about for the next hour or so. We're going to talk a little bit about all the considerations you need to make, or you should make rather, to get through a well-planned deployment. So at this point, we have a few assumptions. One of the assumptions that we're making is that you've chosen Lync as a solution for your organization, and you are sort of getting into the motion of how do I actually do this? How do I do this on a global scale, on an organizational scale? What are the things I need to think about? And how do I grow this, this sort of thing? And really, the color I want to put on it, and you're all very smart people, I'm sure, and so you already know, all the things that you need to do. So that's going to be a revision for you. But the color I'm going to put on it is if you plan your activities well, and you sort of list out all the things that need to happen to be able to deliver this, what is the value that you're going to get versus just doing something sort of ad hoc, growing it from a science project or something like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and that's going to be my most of the topic of my conversation. All the content that you'll see is new, fresh content that hasn't been presented before, so very happy to be here to do that. I do like to keep my sessions a little interactive, so if you have a question about a particular slide or about a particular topic, I would ask, I've sort of broken it up into 5 sections, so I would ask if at the end of the section you have questions, I will pause. If you have questions, please step up to the mic. We are recording the session. I'd like to be able to get as much value from there as possible. Another thing that is happening in this session is that I am giving out $10 per question. So if you want to make some money, this is the right place to be at Lync Conference, so certainly do that. There is a limited amount, obviously. Don't want to go bankrupt here. So no, I'm not kidding about the $10, by the way. This is absolute serious. So let's get underway here. I mentioned earlier that we've sort of at this point made a decision about Lync, and we've decided that Lync is an absolute fantastic technology. It's pivotal to our business requirements and the change that we're trying to bring with Lync. And all the beautiful things that we can do. We can collaborate effectively. We know that it increases productivity. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we increase the reach of communications technology, such as Lync, across broader organization. So when I said this is all original content, it was a little bit of a lie. This particular slide is something I presented. This is the only repeated slide. Is something that I presented at Lync Conference last year. And when we were talking about the business case, we're making the business case for unified communications, and talked a little bit about what are the levers that really motivate people to embark on this journey, to start work with what are we going to do. And these are just some of the things, right? This may not be all-encompassing. Not all of them may apply to you, but these are some of the main ones that we see that drive a lot of value back into the organization. So reducing travel expenses, audio conferencing charges is a really big one, telephony charges, obviously, with some mobility stuff, and then real estate and facility. A lot of people don't think about real estate facility, and I'll also go further to say the environmental savings, for example, power and cooling and so on. A lot of people don't think about that aspect of it, but these are some of the examples of the business levers, and encourage you to actually go find that presentation and take a look at it, because it had much more information, such as this. Again, one more thing about CapEx in general, and we'll touch a lot on this in the sections that I've outlined, but some highlights again on the things that you can actually avoid from an infrastructure perspective, from a CapEx perspective. Some numbers broken down. I'm not going to go through detail on this particular slide, because as I said, we're not making the business case for UC at the moment. We're making we're getting ready to plan that deployment to get the maximum value for it. So if you want to know more about business case, the business value track has some great sessions that you can attend to hear more about this kind of stuff. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I want to ask you this, right? Or you should ask yourself this. What business requirements are driving universal communications in my organization? right? Is it a mobile workforce? Am I looking to enable a more mobile workforce? Do I have real estate considerations? Maybe I've got a new building coming up. Maybe there's something that I want to consolidate. Maybe I want to allow people to work from home so I can do some real estate consolidation. Maybe there's geographies that I'm collapsing or expanding. Those are some considerations to make as well that might be drivers for UC. Enhancing customer interaction. Again, not one that completely immediately jumps out of your mind, but going on the same lines as a demo that you saw in the keynote. So you can see how we can now use UC, the tool that we thought was, for the most part, an internal organizational tool. We can use that to reach out to other organizations and our customers, so B2C interaction. We're going to talk a little bit about what that impact is as well. And then integration into business processes. Again, not the most obvious one, but we're going to see a little bit about how you have existing business workflows, and integrating communications into those workflows can be super beneficial to what you're already doing. Then you need to ask yourself, what does success look like for me? What's my end goal, right? And so if you always work backwards, this is what I want to deliver. This is the solution I'm trying to deliver to my users. These are my objectives. This is the SLA I want to provide. If you work backwards from that, you'll be very successful in trying to figure out what the steps are to get to that place. And then how will this change people, right? How will it change what people do today? There's obviously some things here that are going to be new to your users, your customers, your organization. Some of the things they're already doing, but in a new way, right? So you have to understand what those are so that you can actually understand what business processes you may need to change, how you may need to affect your users with that to gain the maximum benefit. So those are sort of some of the key things that we'll talk a little bit about in detail. So what do you need to consider, right? Talked a little bit about the goals. We're also going to talk a little bit about how do you consume the service. This is something that it probably seems a little interesting, and I think it's a little bit of a Microsoft terminology. How do we consume the service? What does that mean? We'll talk a little bit about that, right? But we're going to talk about, is it a cloud-based model? Do I want to consume the technology that way? Is it on-premise? Do I need to work with somebody else to figure out how am I going to deploy this from an IT perspective, right? And who's going to help me, right? This is also something very important. Obviously, you understand that as an IT organization, you're going to have a lot of work being done by yourself, but perhaps that's not your entire remit. So we're going to talk a little bit about who's going to help you do this as well. How will your users use the technology, right? We know how they're going to use it, but they don't know what's coming, right? So we have to sort of work on that front as well. Change management, enabling adoption, and support. These are all considerations that we'll walk through as we go to the course of this presentation. So how will planning help? I've got this gentleman painted himself into a corner here for a simple reason, right? There's always great ideas. Universal communications, great idea. Lync, fantastic idea. But until you plan and execute that idea very, very well, you're not going to realize those benefits, right? And sometimes people will blame the technology. Sometimes people will blame what actually happened. And we don't want any of that, right? We want to make sure you made a business case for this for a reason. We want to make sure you help realize it. So what I've done, actually, is I've pivoted around 3 pillars. And I'm going to make a case for you here that these are these 3 pillars that determine how and when you will achieve your bottom line. The first pillar is design, consume, and operate, right? This is sort of basic, right? Somebody's got to design the solution. How do I consume it? Where's it going to lie? Where's it going to rest? Is it going to be, what kind of infrastructure do I need? All that kind of stuff. And then operate. How will I support this on an ongoing basis, right? Over the next 1, 2, 10, 20 years, right? So that's one pillar. The second pillar is going to be about endpoints and capabilities, right? So we all realize that we can enable the capability, but people who are going to use that capability or interface with that technology are very key important consideration for here as well. So we want to make sure that from a devices standpoint, we're looking at the right devices. From a capability standpoint, we're providing people either with new capability or the existing capability that they have in a much better way. And the third one is adoption and integration. And the reason why these are pillars around what I'm trying to do here is that if you take a look, and I'm not going to read through each one of these things, but each of these pillars will provide us with real business value to your organization. Whether it's reducing your TCO with devices and endpoints, whether it's reducing support and operational overhead, IT infrastructure, whether it's realizing quicker ROI. Sometimes ROI can take longer depending on how quickly your users adopt and how quickly you roll out the technology to them. So those are the pillars that I'm going to use to really drive that business value back into your organization to make sure. And I'm going to make the case that planning drives these 3 pillars. Does that make sense? Everybody okay with that? Great. Good news. So first, let's talk a little bit about knowing your users and why that's important and how that's going to drive those 3 pillars. So who are my users, right? I think all of us, well, okay, I won't speak for all of us. I'm always a victim of the thought that everybody out there who's using technology uses it exactly as I do. And that's actually a pretty big trap, right? Because I'm probably not the corner case or the use case for most of this technology. So we need to understand these personas, right? And by personas, we mean, are they mobile workers? Are they support workers, information workers, desk workers, task workers? We need to understand that. We need to understand that so we can understand what kind of policies those people need, right? Not everybody is going to need the same set of policies and user capabilities as everybody else. So we need to figure out what those personas are so we can assign them those policies. What capabilities do they need? Does everybody need HD video conferencing? Does everybody need to have international calling? We also need to figure out those personas because we're going to give them devices. Some people like desk phones. Some people like USB headsets, Bluetooth headsets. Some people want to use something else. So we want to make sure that once we segment that population out based on need and personal choice, we can figure out how to enable them to interface with this technology. And then locations is important as well. I talked a little bit about real estate consolidation earlier. If you take a look at how you're going to do that, right? If you're going to designate, I'm a mobile worker. I don't have an office space in Microsoft. My home office is my primary office. I go to the multiple Microsoft offices sometimes to camp out. So I have a different set of requirements than somebody who actually goes in, has a dedicated space, and so on. So we need to figure that out as well so we can actually consolidate those kinds of things. So that's user profiling. Let's talk about user segmentation for a second. I talked a little bit about how why we're going to need to segment these users and what we're going to do. So how are we going to segment those users? I make a suggestion here to segment users by role and by function. And by doing that, you'll develop a user population for all of those things that I talked about: policies, capabilities, devices, and locations. Right? So once you do that, you'll be able to figure out, what am I supposed to be providing to this user population? When am I supposed to be providing that, and how? Right? That's the idea. And then understanding the demographic. Right? How do they communicate today? What tools and services do they use? What am I enabling them for? And what change is that going to bring to their processes in my organization? So knowing your users, we talked a little bit about that. Policies and compliance will help us determine what classes of service we have. This is very important because it's also going to help us tie into the scale that we bring our solution to. Right? If 100% of your users are not being enabled for video, that affects scale. Right? If they're not being enabled for voice, that affects scale. But if they are being enabled for conferencing, that affects design and scale. So we got to figure that out. Devices and experience. Right? That's very important to figure out what devices I'm going to give them, when I'm going to give it to them, and what experience are they going to get. Because that's going to increase or decrease the TCO of my total overall solution. And it's going to get that accelerated adoption going as well. So remember we talked about this, the 3 fundamental pillars. So what I'm going to do is each section, I'm actually going to map knowing the users, for example, in this particular section, to how that maps into these pillars and why it's important. So knowing your users is actually very, very important because it maps into the first couple of things that you want to do. Everybody okay? Section break questions? Good. Let's talk about cloud, or on-prem, or both. This is a very, very important decision. especially more so now than ever, right? We have a lot of deployment options, and the cloud is sort of one of those major disruptive technologies, or mega trends as we call them, that is really changing the way we look at technology, the way we deploy technology, and the way we consume technology. How many of you here don't use a cloud service? Any cloud service? I'm going to venture out and say that those hands that are raised are not correct. If you use Skype, or a web-based email program, or a cloud storage program, you're using the cloud. Cloud is a fundamental part of our lives today. And we want to make sure that we offer you that choice when you're looking at unified communications or universal communications. You're looking at whether the cloud fits for you as an IT organization. Some of the benefits of a cloud: agility in deployment, right? Reduced ownership of infrastructure, repurpose internal IT spend towards technology, right, and devices, and it's a managed service. So you can figure out if you as an organization are staffed from an IT perspective to be able to do this, or you want somebody else to do it for you. A lot of people think that, hey, if I go to the cloud, that's it. I'm in the cloud, and there's nowhere else to go from there. The cloud doesn't have to be exclusive, right? You can have, and I'll talk a little bit about the really, really superior engineering decisions that we've made to be able to allow this choice to you. If you want to be in the cloud for some of your users, you can be. If some of them want to be on-premise, they can be as well. There's capability differences. There's things that you want to manage yourself. There's things that you want managed outside. That's absolutely fine. Whether you want to do it by geography, by segmenting your users, that's entirely up to you. That's the choice that we've provided. So we have Lync Server, which is our on-premise product. We have Lync Online, which is our Office 365 or in the cloud, Microsoft-provided UC as a service product. And then we have the hybrid solution, where you can have best of both worlds, if you so decided. I have a customer of mine right now that is deploying around 10,000 or so users in Asia, but they've got a population in the US. And the alternative would have been for them to go ahead and deploy those users on-prem, deploy another infrastructure piece there, but they didn't have anybody to manage it because it's mostly non-IT users. So they decided to do cloud for those users. So they've got about 2,000 people in the cloud in the US, 10,000 in Asia. Absolutely fine. We enable that choice. So those are some of the things that you have to consider when you're evaluating deployment options. Do I want a public cloud? That's usually a multi-tenant shared cloud infrastructure by somebody like Microsoft. Or do I want a private cloud? So this is a virtual dedicated instance for me by a partner, perhaps. Where do I want this, right? Do I want to have this with Microsoft in their data centers? Do I have existing relationships with a partner, and perhaps I want it to be there? Do I have any regulatory or legal requirements for PSTN which don't allow me to do that, which don't allow me to have a wide option for doing this? So I may need a partner-hosted cloud or a managed service or a private cloud. Those are also things to consider to be able to do that. And then do I need an on-premise solution to complement my cloud? Maybe there's some PSTN regulations you need to work around, or perhaps there's IT managed control that you want to do in certain geographies. Those are all considerations you're going to make. So that's a pretty important piece as well to be able to figure out in terms of whether you're going to be cloud, on-prem, or both. And that's really going to map into two things here. Obviously, the design, how do I consume and how do I operate this? But also in the adoption and integration. I talked a little bit about how cloud provides agility, right? So let's say that you have your cloud customer, Lync Online, and you have a new office coming up, right? What would you have to do in an on-premise solution to enable that office? Probably think about some infrastructure considerations. Maybe you need to build out scale in your infrastructure. Maybe you need to deploy local infrastructure, those kinds of things. But if you have a new office coming up and you're a Lync Online customer, it's just as simple as going into the provisioning tool, provisioning those users. That's it. There's a lot of agility there, right? So there's a lot of adoption and integration considerations as well when you think about how people consume this technology and where it's at. Any questions about cloud online? There we go. Could I ask you to step up to the mic just for the recording? Sorry. Thank you.
Healthcare organization where I work, HIPAA compliance with cloud. I would like to execute a good plan on presenting to executives of security.
Sure.
It's okay to use cloud. It's not bad. We're not going to be exposed. I need, that's solutions for cloud that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. We have some great, we're making some great traction with security folks for the cloud piece. And we have some really, really good references in how our solution is certified for the cloud. Come to me offline, and I will provide you with some links that provide you specifically references for cloud and secure places. But while that's the answer, keep in mind that the options that have been presented to you allow you to go whatever level you want. So if public cloud doesn't work for you from a security compliance standpoint, there's always private cloud, there's always on-premise, right? And there's always a mix of both. I do have a customer that are putting their SCIF users, so the secured users, on-premise and having the rest of their users sort of in the public cloud as well. So there are options, but certainly we've made a lot of traction in that regard. Any other thoughts or questions around cloud? Cool. So let's talk a little bit about your environment, right? And this is actually a very, very important piece. So I have some interesting things to say about this here. A lot of people just think this is an application that's kind of independent of my environment. It's like Exchange or SharePoint, where I'll deploy this service and it'll just work, right? Real-time communications is a little bit different, right? There's some things that we have to think through to be able to get there from a seamless user experience perspective. Network being the foremost important one, right? The underlying network is the fabric of communications, right? There's nothing that can happen without a good solid network, whether it's your wired network, your wireless network, or your LAN. You're supporting applications, right? We've designed the application to be very, very tightly integrated with things like identity services from Active Directory, Exchange for asynchronous communications. We've also worked on figuring out what kind of integrations we have with Office, so that's also very important. So those are all considerations from an application standpoint you need to make. Is my Exchange the right level? Is my AD ready to consume this? Security infrastructure is also very important as well. Do I have DMZ appropriation? PKI, Lync is, I'll go as far as saying we're the only vendor that by default secures all communication back and forth between clients and between servers. And we do that with the help of PKI infrastructure. So do I have a PKI infrastructure that helps? Operating systems, believe it or not, important part of your decision, right? What is my large operating system base? Do you have a large XP base? You need to consider that. Again, going back to your users and profiling that, right? What other existing applications do I expect to interface with this? I have contact centers. I have billing systems. I have recording systems. What is the state of those applications, and how does that play with Lync, right? And then interop requirements. Maybe I have investments in legacy telephony or video that I need to be able to leverage. So what are my interop requirements? Are they on the right levels? Can I actually interop with Lync and my legacy equipment? So talking a little bit about network and security. Network assessments are very important, right? If you're moving, especially if you're moving from a non-IP-based communications solution to an IP-based communication solution, you need to know exactly what to expect once you bring that workload into your organization. What impact is that going to have on your network, right? And not just for knowing what impact it's going to have, that's going to allow you to right-size the solution that you make, provision the right capabilities for the users, but also put a growth plan with your networking team that this is where we want to go. This is what we want to achieve. Maybe in 3 years we want bandwidth to increase by this much, or latency, or new contracts are coming up with our providers. we need to guarantee quality of service. Those are very, very important considerations. By the way, you're more than welcome to take pictures off the slides. I see that people doing that all over the conference. It's great, but I do want to let you know the slides are available for download 48 hours after. So if you're looking to save some of this, but more than welcome. Just if you get me in the picture, just make sure it's my good side, which is the left side. Thank you. So from a security perspective, we also want to make sure you do a security assessment, right? We're going to be enabling ubiquitous access from anywhere in the organization. We want to make sure the security teams are on board. Firewall requirements are taken care of. DMZ is ready for consuming this as well, right? I talked about PKI earlier. It's very important to secure PKI infrastructure for both public and internal stuff. Core applications, I already talked about Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, all the integration points for Lync. Talk a little bit about Office, what versions you need to be at, and so on. Those are all things that you're going to think about. From a client perspective, it's not just operating systems that you've deployed on the desktop. It's also about BYOD. If you expect a lot of your users to be bringing in their own devices and being able to connect to your corporate network and being able to consume communications as a service on that device, then you need to figure out what your BYOD strategy is as well, and whether you can support your users depending on the devices they're bringing in. Existing services in interop, contact center, big one, right? Always our customers are asking me, hey, I've got contact center X and Y. How's that going to work with Lync? I'm going to enable my contact center agents with Lync. That's something very important to consider, right? That's one example. If you have call recording software, then now you're going to be able to have to interop there. That's also something important. How are you going to bill? Right? Billing software needs to be figured out if they're going to integrate that with a solution, whether it's for conferencing or audio or video. Those are important. Interop, I have yet to meet a customer that doesn't have some sort of voice solution in their environment, right? So you need to figure out if that voice solution in the migration period while you're enabled, you're probably not going to do a big bang enablement for all your users. It's going to take you some time. So in that time, there's a migration strategy, and that migration strategy has to include interop. So are you ready? Is your voice solution ready to interop with us? So how does all of that, my environment being ready, tie back into our three fundamental pillars here, right? Very, very important. It ties into everything, right? Assessing your environment and making sure that it's ready before you start deploying is a key aspect. Network assessments, the proper envisioning, the proper user profiling, infrastructure, applications, assessment, all go into this because it affects all of our pillars if we're going to achieve that bottom line. Who's going to help you do this? Who will it be? Choose a partner based on your needs, right? You're not going to be able to do all of this on your own. You have to choose a partner depending on what you need. Whether you want to go with a factory team, and here in the factory team, it's actually a team. It's a term that I learned from my colleague over there, sitting Matt Gordon. Whether you want the factory team to help you with design and guidance, oversight and support. Whether you want a partner that provides you the geographic coverage that you need. Maybe you're a global organization with 1,100 offices around the world, and you need somebody that does that coverage, right? Do you already have existing relationships with partners, either in the networking space, in the IT space? Maybe they manage your data network for you, their telephony for you. Who are those partners, and are they capable to do this with you? Do you want a managed services partner? Do you not want to manage this on an ongoing basis? Maybe you want to host it. Maybe you want to provide the data center and the infrastructure for it, but you don't want to deal with the IT stuff. You don't want it to support it or do add moves and changes on it. That's also something to consider in partner. Do you want a single vendor to provide you hardware and services and support? Who is that single vendor going to be? Right? ISV solution partners. Maybe there's an add-on solution that I want to provide with UC. There's, Partner Showcase is showing a bunch of them. We have like a huge solutions catalog on lync.com that you can take a look at through, and what solutions fit your organization. Those are also partner considerations to make. Talk a little bit about this factory team I was mentioning. And I have this wordy slide. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I want to make sure I mention, because there's not a lot of people who understand what Microsoft can do to help you, right? So we provide strategic consulting services to organizations that are vertical focused, that work with your organization to find out what communication strategy fits for you. There is no one-size-fits-all for a communication strategy. So we provide those strategic consulting services. We provide professional consulting services to provide assessment workshops. I talked about network assessments. I talked about other things, guidance, support, envisioning, service descriptions, what SLA are we going to meet, training plans, rollout strategy, all of that as a package. We're going to talk a little bit about support coming up as well. What kind of support options do you need, and how do you need that support from Microsoft? Right? We also provide a service where we work with your business to understand what line of business apps can be leveraged with communications, and how your business processes can be improved. So if you want to know more about that, let me know after the session, and I can tell you. So from a support perspective, let's talk a little bit about support. What kind of SLA are you delivering? This is very important. I have in branch offices and hardware, I have a customer of mine that had, maybe 500 bank branches across their geography. And they said to me that they've got maybe 8 or 10 users per bank branch. And so we said, okay, when we're scoping out the solution for them, we said, you're going to need perhaps a SBA solution or branch survivable solution in every branch. Times 500, that was getting to be pretty expensive. And they're like, you know what? I really don't need to provide a 5.9 or 3.9 or whatever high SLA for my branch users. If their connectivity to the central location goes down, they'll use the Lync client on their cell phones, which is fine. And they didn't put any infrastructure at the branches, or some branches they did and some branches they didn't. So those are considerations you're going to need to make from a support perspective. What SLA am I going to provide? Do you have Tier 1 and Tier 2 support in your organization, or capability to do that? Because that changes the decision as well. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And self-help bots. This is a kind of an interesting one as well that I wanted to share. We at Microsoft have this interesting tool that we use. It's called, I don't know what his name is now. Used to have a pretty cool name. But essentially, I can go to, this is a guy in my contact list. I can say hi, or I need help, or how are you? And he prompts me, this Lync expansion window opens up with all the stuff that I can ask for support on. So I can choose any of these little tiles here. It's like a drill down menu. And then when I reach the final destination, it's either opens a ticket for me, or allows me to make the call to the right person without having to struggle with an IVR system. So this is an interesting way to self-support, right? And we've reduced a significant amount of support calls with a simple tool such as this, right? So that's also something to think about when you're thinking about support. You have a bunch of other support options. We can provide anything from product support, full end-to-end solution support. SLAs are different. Coverage of devices and hardware and so on is different. There's a great talk by Adrian McLean about this particular, all the details on this. If you're interested, please take a look at that. But essentially, you need to understand what your support requirements are so you can choose the right solution from this box. So how does that help? How do the services, who's going to help me and who's going to help support this, help my business case, right? Tremendously. It fits into these vectors, right? My adoption and integration will only be relevant if I've got the necessary support or support infrastructure in place to be able to roll out my users, right? And how I design that solution, how I consume that solution is going to be very important based on what I'm providing to my users as an SLA. Any question around services in general? Professional services, support services, planning? Okay, cool. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, I'm going to break the lull here for a second and show you something. Let's see here.
The local news of the week. At midnight Saturday, the telephones in this city will be changed to dial service, and all telephone numbers will be changed. Late this week, new directories will be delivered. Here are a few important suggestions for the use of your dial telephone. Before calling any number, first secure the number from your new directory. Then remove the receiver and listen for the dial tone. It sounds like this. That tone indicates everything is ready for your call. With the receiver off the hook, dial the desired number. For example, suppose you want to dial 23650. Dial each numeral in this manner, pulling the dial around to the finger stop each time. Be sure to allow the dial to freely return to its normal position. And this is the ringing signal. If the line is busy, you'll hear this busy signal. Until Saturday midnight, please use your present directory and make your calls in the usual manner.
So that did happen, right? This is not fictional. And while we can use that as a piece of humor today, it was probably pretty relevant at the time. The point I'm trying to make with this is that you're enabling users for something new, for a change. And training and adoption is probably one of the most key things that you're going to have to think about once you start to roll this out. Right? How will my users use this? Although very intuitive user experiences, we understand that people should be able to pick this up in general, but remember, we're introducing to them something that they're already doing, but asking them to do it in a different way, which we know is going to make it better, right? But we need to help them get there, right? So we want to make sure that end-user training is on your mind. The advantage of having end-user training and the proper sort of way is it's going to reduce support calls, right? If you don't tell a person something obvious, they're going to call IT, oh, I can't do this, right? And if you had the right training materials in front of them, at some point, whether you deliver them through a website or whether you deliver them to the email, however you do, we have those materials to provide to you, so you can provide that to your users. Right? The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is adoption, right? So once you've rolled it out, let's assume you rolled it out to 20, 30, 40% of your population. Right? How do you monitor it? Are people using it, or is it just sitting there? Right? This is an example of a exclusive dashboard that Premier customers have to be able to monitor not only how many minutes am I consuming, how many conferencing minutes happened, how many voice minutes happened, who's my users, what is the time frame of video calls are spiking or voice calls are spiking, and so on. A really very, very good picture of what your adoption looks like. And if you do this over time, perhaps you want to do it weekly or monthly, you'll be able to tell that, my users are picking up. And you can also do this by geography, or you can split it out by kind of the segments of users that you built out and say, hey, people in Arkansas are really, really loving this, and they're adopting it very quickly. But New York, not so much. I don't know what's going on. So maybe there's a training program that hasn't happened there, or maybe you need to get out there and get in front of the users and figure out what's the blocker to this adoption. Because until this happens, all the IT spend that you've made, you're not going to realize that ROI. Until people use conferencing, you're not going to reduce conferencing minutes on other providers. Until they start using mobile clients, you're not going to be able to see that decrease in mobile minutes that we propagate from a business case scenario. Okay? Talk a little bit about application integration for a second, right? We want to enhance your business processes with communications. What does that mean? What that means is there's probably a top-line application that you use today. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's SAP, maybe it's something else, maybe it's a 3D modeling tool, maybe it's an oil rig that you want to find, or oil mining software that you use for your oil rigs. Whatever it is, whatever industry vertical you're in, whatever top-line application you're in, it's up to us to figure out how do we enable that application with, can we make the process of that application better with communications, right? We've had many, many examples of this, and there's some examples to be seen downstairs in the expo floor as well. But that's really driving that process. Something very simple that's actually 4 years old that I still use as an example is an approval workflow, right? Somebody puts in a purchase order. I need to purchase some equipment for the office. Boss is on vacation, or he's left for the day, and that's going to sit there for 3 days until he comes back, and then it's going to go through. There's a delay in process. So instead, what a company of ours, or a customer of ours did, was they built a simple bot that said, okay, my approval chain, Aruba, my software, is going to kick off an approval chain, and it's going to, instead of emailing the approver, which is usually what happens, I'm going to call him via Lync. So they call him on his cell phone and say, look, there's a purchase order waiting for you. Do you want to approve it? Press 1. If you want to decline it, press 2. Or if you want to talk to the person who submitted it, press 3. Right? Instant. And if he approves it, it's in the system. It's gone through. We saved a lot of time. Right? Those are things that are going to really, really help. We talk about making it better. Right? How about we've deployed this solution. Now, what is the next step? And this is not just relevant for new customers who are planning their deployments, but existing customers as well. If you've got Lync in your organization, think about how you can make it better. Right? This is an example of customer service. I gave you a bot process example. This is a real example of how much money you can save just by providing more collaborative, more interactive customer service. Right? This is taking some assumptions about calls per month, how much time you can reduce per call, what that time amounts to in dollars, and what savings it's looking at. That's quite a significant number. Right? And again, this is not internal. Right? Think about how you can leverage this for external customers. Right? Maybe you're a bank, and or maybe you're even a small business, even if you're a tire shop, right? And somebody's browsing your website looking for tires, and they can't find that particular model that they need. This one particular model, it's got a letter missing. Think about the power of them being able to reach out to you instantly over many modalities to collaborate. Hey, look at this is what I'm seeing. Where do I go to find this particular tire that I want, or this particular tool that I want? That's a very, very powerful story. This is another example of being able to leverage your internal. So I always tell people the most important asset that your organization has is probably not even the IP that you have, but it's the people, right? Being able to find those people, knowing what those people are doing at any given time, there's nothing more powerful than that. This is an application we use internally at Microsoft. This is the Sydney office, and these particular people are being located by either Wi-Fi or GPS. I know exactly where they are. I know exactly what their presence is. Are they able to talk to me? So before I lock my computer and walk all the way over there, 3 floors up or different building, I know what's happening there. Right? Very powerful solution. This is just examples, right? To get you thinking about it. By no means are these the right examples for you. They may be, but we can help you. Microsoft has services to do this, to help you figure out what are these scenarios for your company to figure that out. So how does that tie into our 3 pillars? We want to make sure this will help adoption and integration a lot, and the endpoints and capabilities, right? To be able to figure out, okay, if we do the right training and adoption, what kind of capabilities can we provide to the users? Some users may not know that they have the ability to conference people in and do HD conferencing and share documents and share whiteboards and have meeting notes in there, download that presentation, download that recording, all of that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that all the capabilities tie into how you make the solution better. Okay? Make the most of it. Any questions, by the way, on that section? Application integration plus adoption, training. Okay, fair enough. I guess $10 is not a lot of money. So where's the bottom line? The bottom line is, what will we achieve with better planning? Right? We'll achieve the ROI quicker. How will we achieve the ROI quicker? Our users will be using the solution faster. If we've decided to deploy a cloud-based solution, then we're going to be more agile in that deployment, right? We're going to be able to support our users better, provide a higher level of service to them by choosing the right partner to both deploy and support it, right? So everything about the ROI or the business case that we made to our management earlier will be done quicker, right? We're going to keep the TCO at a minimum, right? Did we need infrastructure to deploy? Does everybody in our organization need a desk phone or a dedicated device that provides one capability only? Do we need to give them multiple devices that are cheaper? Right? We're going to keep our TCO at a minimum by planning it, by segmenting those users. Right? And then definitely realizing those productivity benefits quicker. The quicker your users adopt it, the sooner they'll be able to realize those benefits. And I think this one is a little understated. Create new opportunities. I talked about customer care a little bit. I talked a little bit about business processes integration. You saw the demo as well. How powerful is that story, right? How powerful is it to reach out to suppliers and vendors and customers across the world using tools that you already have without having to do anything? You've got Skype, you've got Lync, you can make that connection today. Through your website, through mobile clients. Anything is possible, right? What does that mean for you? Does that open up new opportunities for business, for revenue? Right? That's a very key consideration as well. So I'm going to bring it all together. Here are all the planning vectors I showed you today, right? Knowing your users, profiling them, segmenting them, figuring out what their needs are. Deciding on how you're going to consume that service. Deploying it in the cloud, public or private, on-premise, or maybe best of both worlds. Talk a little bit about environment, right? Is your environment ready? Network, applications, infrastructure. What does that do? What implications does that have? Who is going to help you do this? Both from a deployment services perspective, support services perspective. Who do you choose as your partner? And then how do you make it better? Once you've deployed it, how do you make it better for your users, for your customers, and for your overall business? And once you execute on that, you will be able to achieve your bottom line for your business case that you set out. Does that make sense? Cool. So summarize, plan it, execute it, be a hero. And I was thinking about putting a really nice superhero picture here, like Jaren did last time, but couldn't find one. That's all I've got. Any questions or any thoughts? We can make this an open discussion. Please, could you step up to the mic?
You mentioned what kind of SLA do you wish to achieve? I'd like to understand perhaps how Microsoft set its SLAs and what they are.
How Microsoft sets its SLAs? That's a good question. So SLAs are a little bit of a conundrum in our industry here, right? Especially with universal communications. With Lync, we have multiple workloads. So we've got the IAM presence workload, conferencing, voice, video, collaboration. So each of those workloads, I've learned, carries a different SLA. Or our customers expect it to carry a different SLA. So what we've done in the architecture of the solution as well is we've planned for those different workloads having different SLAs. For example, we understand that voice carries a pretty high SLA. So in our architecture, we've provided for that. There's no single point of failure in a well-planned Lync deployment from a voice perspective. So we can actually guarantee that SLA quite a bit if we do that. The interesting thing that people forget about SLAs is it's not just the application, right? I don't care how well I design Lync. If the network fails at that time, either to the endpoint or to the data center or somewhere, there's nothing you're doing about it. So what is your network SLA? Right? What is your application SLA? All of those things combined come up with an SLA. In the Lync Online service, we have a defined SLA that we provide to our customers. Somebody will have to, Alan, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but it's usually 3 nines is what we provide from Lync Online, which is the service that we provide. We, as a services organization, have a defined product line architecture that we work with our customers when we were talking about deploying in professional services perspective. And that product line architecture, if you deploy that, that itself carries an SLA and a service description of 3 nines for the whole solution, as an example. Could you get higher than that? Sure, right? Could you be lower than that? Absolutely, depending on your network, depending on your infrastructure, and so on. Right? Your question was more around us as an organization and what SLA do we provide and how we provide that. I don't believe we've quantified that. Right? I don't believe we've quantified at a global level what SLA we will provide. And there's a key reason for that. At Microsoft, we take a lot of pride in that technology, and we deploy technology 6 months before it's ever released to the public. Right? And we chose to be on that cutting edge. We chose to be on that bleeding edge. So we don't actually quantify that SLA. But I can get back to you with something, which is we've published, Microsoft IT has published the case study and the report of how they've done or deployed Lync. In fact, there is a session at Lync Conference that talks a lot about how Microsoft IT deployed it, consume it, and operate it. So if you take a look at that session, I'm sure a lot of your question will be answered, but there is a case study as well online that you can take a look at. You're most welcome. Any other questions or thoughts? There is a question. Here we go. And you, sir, the last $10 of the day. You are.
When you were talking about the hybrid solution, are we talking apples to apples as far as what the end user would see, cloud versus on-premises deployments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're talking about the hybrid solution, is it apples to apples based on what users will see on-premise and what users will see online? And the answer is no. It kind of depends, actually. So today, we don't have, in the cloud, full capability to do PSTN voice. Okay? We heard earlier this week that that capability is coming very shortly, but as of right now, we don't. So that would be one thing that you would miss. The cloud is an interesting scenario for some use cases. We're not expecting enterprise-grade capabilities in the cloud for voice, for example, or some of the application integration stuff that we talked about. Right? If you've got those requirements to tie your line of business apps, you're probably going to need some on-premise infrastructure as well. Right? So it's not completely apples to apples, in all fairness, but it has a very, very broad coverage for users' needs. Okay. Thank you for the question. Sure? Sorry, I don't have any more money.
I won't hold it against you.
Great.
I deal with a lot of smaller companies.
Sure.
Less than 5,000 people, typically.
Okay.
A lot of them want to go into everything except voice enterprise. I've got maybe 25% want to go to voice enterprise. Network assessment is driving me insane because all the tool vendors are, $50,000 a go,
sure,
whatever. Are there any solutions coming to this particular conundrum? Because especially with the smaller clients, their networks are not as good as the enterprise.
Yeah, no, absolutely, makes sense. It's an interesting question. There's two things to network monitoring, management, and assessment, right? One is what you talked about is, at a go, there's a chunk of money up front that you've got to spend to figure out where you're at. And the network assessment isn't just a tool, right? It's not just, I'm going to put equipment on your network, figure out what happened, and then tell you, right? The brains behind a network assessment is modeling what kind of traffic you're going to put on the network, right? And analyzing the results of that modeling to be able to make an educated report to your customer to say, Lync, with all of its workloads, is going to have this impact, right? So while some of the solutions out there are great, we've developed sort of this brain power around the analysis piece and the modeling piece. There is a bandwidth calculator that's freely available for you to use. So you can download the bandwidth calculator and do the modeling assessment yourself. If you work with Microsoft, we provide this, by the way, to you as a service. You can actually contract Microsoft to be able to do the bandwidth modeling for you and the analysis, which is really the main crux of it. The tool doesn't matter, right? What do you pump into? What is the input of the tool, and how do you analyze the output of the tool? I don't know if there's anything other than that coming. There's a bunch of providers downstairs. Ixia's downstairs. There's a couple of others that are downstairs that help do this. And certainly Microsoft can help you do this as well. So if you have more questions about that, let me know, and we can do that. I'm not 100% sure who's downstairs who can help you answer that question. Okay? Does that help? A little bit? Is there a follow-on?
Yeah, well, all goes downstairs,
50, 60, 70,000, yeah. So, and your question is because it's more of a small, medium business solution. I also mentioned that there's two components to this, right? So the second component is, okay, you're done. You did your analysis, and you moved on. Now, I've deployed Lync, and perhaps the call quality isn't great, or perhaps I need to monitor, maybe I'm reaching capacity as I roll out to the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 users, right? You need to do an active monitoring as well. So the active monitoring piece I've talked a little bit about, right? We have some tools built into Lync that you can use to help monitor call quality on an ongoing basis and so on. So that's already built into the application. You don't have to do anything else for that. In your particular case for small organizations, if the upfront big bang network assessment looks like to be a little bit much, I would start with a bandwidth analyzer, or bandwidth calculator, sorry, that's online. Do the modeling exercise yourself. And it's actually fairly interesting because it'll give you graphs and charts of which locations it believes is oversubscribed and which ones are not, which ones may need more bandwidth or more latency or more jitter or those kinds of things. What it won't give you is it won't give you a real-time look. So it'll give you theoretical numbers of this many users, these workloads, how does that map? But it won't actually tell you how your network is performing. So you can do that on the slightly more budget-oriented side. But if you actually wanted to see real-time how your network handles the data, that number is probably accurate. Sorry. There's another one. Sorry, I wish I had more.
It's all right. That's okay. All right. So suppose you've done this or taken your best shot at it for Lync 2010, and now you're looking to migrate to 2013.
Sure.
What's different? What do you change how you go about this to make sure that the transition is smooth and works as well as possible?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question. Some of the vectors here that I think you'll need to revisit when you're doing that migration, even though you have Lync 2010, I'll assume that all your users are using it and it's, you're getting good adoption from it. You have this decision to make again, right? So you need to figure out, is this working for me? I have it on-prem right now. Do I want to start migrating people to the cloud a little bit? Maybe it's half and half. So that's a decision that you have to make again, right? That's a decision you need to make also, right? Who's going to help you do this migration, right? Am I going to do it myself? Am I going to work with Microsoft to do it? Do I get a partner to do it? What are the implications of that? And then the make it better stuff, right? That's going to be key. Because from 2010 to 2013, you're going to enable a bunch of new things. You're going to enable mobility, voice over Wi-Fi and 3G, right? You're going to enable a bunch of new features in conferencing and OneNote integrations and Office and so on. So you might need to revisit your training plan and make sure that that training is put out there so that adoption gets done quicker. Because there's no point in upgrading if your new features are not being used. If nobody knows about the mobile clients, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Does that help you? Thank you.
We've got a fairly large deployment. We're still on OCS 2007 R2, but we're looking to go to Lync possibly at the end of the year.
Fantastic.
Some of these things that you're looking at here, knowing the users and is your environment ready, are there tools online? I mean, I'm sure we're probably going to have to get a partner to help with this, but
Sure.
Is there a way we can get an advanced look at some planning tools and start plugging information in?
Yeah.
There's just a ton of information to gather.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So probably I would say that for some of these vectors, there are tools available. And I'll take the ownership of this to say, we, Microsoft, probably need to do a better job of making some of those tools available. So we do have some tools that will help us design and plan infrastructure, for example. We have the planning tool, right? We have some tools like the bandwidth calculator that will help us assess the environment, right? We also have a best practices analyzer that will help us analyze some things. So there are some tools, but across the gamut, no. There isn't a suite of tools that we have across the gamut to be able to help people like yourself. We're looking for a large migration to be able to figure that out. So it's great feedback, and I'm glad Alan's in the room. We're going to capture that. We're going to try to be better here. If you want a list of, I should probably come up with a list of tools that help here and send those to you. So as a resource, I'll take that action as well. Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate it. What? Yeah. Oh, sorry. He walked up to the mic, so he goes first. Apologies.
Mine's just more about user adoption.
Yeah.
We're looking at going to roll out voice.
Sure.
And I'm just curious, if anybody has suggestions there. We've done a little POC. We've had a few phones that we put out at people's desks, but we left their old Nortel phones sit there right next to it.
Sure.
They used it for a while, migrated back to the Nortel phone.
Sure.
What are people seeing out there? Are you doing a rip, grip
Yeah.
and rip? Give them the link, pull out their Nortel, and then make them do it.
Sure.
Just what
Yeah.
People.
No, it's good. It's a great question. It's a very, very good question. There's going to be many opinions on this one, so I'll offer you mine, right? I don't know if rip and replace works for a lot of people, right? But it might be a necessary thing for you to do. Perhaps the PBX that's supporting that phone is end-of-life support contract, and it's a necessity for you to get rid of that phone, right? That could be a cause as well. What I've seen people do a lot of the times is work up the workloads. And it's an interesting term. And what that means is essentially, if you introduce to them conferencing, as an example, forget about voice for a second. So Lync has revolutionary conferencing, right? Never before has conferencing been this visual, right? In terms of you can see who's in the roster, you can IM during the conference, you collaboration, it's seamless, you can drag and drop people in there. It's fantastic from an experience perspective, right? But to get that experience, you're going to need to have a Lync device to be able to leverage that conferencing feature, like a headset or a phone or something like that. So if you immerse them, and a camera, right, because you're going to do the video. If you immerse them into that world, and they're already starting to become, because that's functionality that they don't have anywhere else, right? They don't have from their traditional phone. They just don't have it. So if you immerse them into that world, into conferencing, you'll see that people are going to become more comfortable with it. It is a comfort factor, right, of using a new device, because it's very personal. So if you immerse them into that, then the natural progression is then they'll start wanting to make calls with that own device and receive calls with that own device. That's one approach, right? The second approach, obviously, the rip and replace. There is a third approach, too. I've had an interesting customer that blocked one-way communications from their old phone. So they said, you can make calls from this phone, but you can only receive calls in Lync with the Lync device, right? So they still have the comfort factor. I'm going to really, really quickly call my wife, right? Just do. But when they receive calls, they receive it on a Lync device. So half the time, or whatever percentage of time, they're doing that. That sort of transitions their behavior onto Lync until they realize that it actually is much quicker to do it in the new way, right? So there is some transitionary things that you can do there. These are just my sort of experiences that I've seen be successful. Rip and replace works too. Absolutely. Sorry, sir, you had a question. And I am getting close to, no, I've got time.
You gave an example of the People Finder application that Microsoft uses
Sure.
internally.
Sure.
With applications like that and other tools such as, or other applications, I think there was another internal tool called My Setup. Heard of that one? You aware of that one?
My setup at Microsoft? Yeah,
Yeah.
I know what that is.
Yeah, so is it Microsoft's intent that these are only for demonstration, so, this look what you can do, or is there any intent that perhaps that this might be available to others?
Oh, no, absolutely. I can't speak to My Setup because I don't know the organization that runs it or maintains it. But the Find Me application that you saw is absolutely something that we will gladly give you. In fact, I was talking a little bit about services earlier, but we can engage with you to figure out how it's not just the Find Me, here's a map, here's people, right? How does that integrate with whatever else you've got, right? Maybe you've got a website that requires, maybe you're a security dispatch center that needs that, or whatever it is, right? Certainly, we can engage with you strategically to figure out how that fits into your organization and provide you that. Absolutely, yeah. It's not just for demo. Absolutely not. Cool. If there's no more questions, any more questions? I will thank you for being a great audience. One thing I will ask from you is, this is a very exciting time for us at Lync Conference. We need your feedback. So whatever you have to say about the session, content, myself, please do give us that feedback. We want to make this better for you, and we really hope you come back to us next year or whenever we have this next. And we would like to incorporate your feedback into our preparation for this conference. So you've been a great audience. Thank you so much. Recordings are available. Slides are available 48 hours after conference ends. Okay? Cool. Thank you. Thank you.